Hey kids, it's Mr. Far here. Hope you're well, and welcome along to another motorcycle review. Today I'm on a bike that's a little bit special. It's one of those manufacturers that you don't get to ride that often, and whenever you do, it's a little bit of an occasion. Today I'm on a Moto Guzzi, and this is their V7 Stone, a fairly basic retro bike, similar vein to things like Triumph Bonnevilles, I suppose. Maybe the Royal Enfield Interceptor, that sort of thing. Basically, it's a bike that's right up my street. So stick around and stay tuned. I'll tell you what I think of it. Okay, well, welcome along to the channel. If you've not been here before, thanks for watching. I hope you find this video of interest. Now, as I mentioned, I've not ridden very many Moto Guzzis before, mainly because there aren't that many dealers around. But anything Italian always has a bit of an air of exclusivity to it, doesn't it? And just makes riding a bike a bit more of an occasion, I think. I don't know why that is, it's just how I feel. And I do love a simple motorcycle, me. This one is, as I say, I don't think it's doing it a disservice to describe it as a basic machine. Try not to kill anybody as I do this review. It comes in around about the £8 mark. I'll talk about the specs when we do the walk around in a minute, including the pricing, and puts out something like 65 brake horsepower. So it's not one of those bikes that's going to win any top trumps competitions on specs alone. But bikes are so much more, aren't they, than just about what the specs are. Anyway, before we get too carried away on the bike, let me just show you around what she looks like. Alright, here she is then. Quite a lovely looking motorcycle actually, and a little bit unusual I think as well, mainly because of the very distinctive V-twin motor that Moto Guzzi use. Here she is. We'll go through the specs in a minute on the bike, but let's just have a quick look around her at the moment just to see some of the little design features that I like in particular. So front to back, so starting here, we've got an LED headlight on here, which I'm not sure whether I like the look of that or not, but it's a little nod to modernity. You've got right way up forks, which is unusual these days, pretty chunky looking things, and unusually a single disc for the brake. More of that a bit later. I do like this 100-year anniversary logo on the front mudguard. That looks really good. And yeah, this general sort of fit and finish of the bike is really, really nice actually. I mean, things like the welds are absolutely top quality, absolutely no pigeon poo here. Really nicely made. As you can see, she's a shaft drive. That's quite important to some people and accounts for a bit of the weight of the bike, of which more a little bit later. But it all looks lovely, so no chain maintenance or anything to worry about there. You've got an LED light on the back as well, which I think that one actually looks pretty cool. The seat on here I particularly like. Not only is it very comfortable, but it looks nice as well. It's got this sort of Alcantara stuff here, and then sort of leathery type stuff here, and of course Moto Guzzi nicely tastefully stitched in the back as well. Again, doesn't feel in any way a bike that's built down to a price, even though I suppose it is. I guess the thing that lets it down maybe on that score is the switch gear. It's very basic, it's a basic bike, but the switch gear is a little bit cheap and nasty, but it's no different to what you'd find on other bikes of this type, I guess. And then what else to say? I quite like the fact it's got a round dial here, even though it's LCD, and again we'll talk more about that later. Anyway, so that's what the bike looks like. Let's jump back on her then and see how she goes. So welcome back aboard then. So much for how she looks. What does she ride like? Well, in a word, characterful, I think is how I'd sum it up. It's one of those bikes that because it's got that very distinctive V-twin transverse mounted engine on here, it's got a lot of rock and roll, a bit like things like the BMW R9T. When you start this machine, you can feel all that torque reaction on the bike, and when you rev the bike, particularly at a standstill, you can feel the bike moving to the side. Some people love that sort of character. Personally, I don't, but that is a feature of this sort of bike. So if you love that sort of rock and roll rumble, then this bike is going to be right up your street. For me, it doesn't do it for me, I'm afraid, but I get that it comes with this sort of machine. Sounds quite cool though. The noise of the engine is just got a low muted rumble. It's nothing obnoxious. It's not going to wake up your neighbours of a Sunday morning, and it's just loud enough. I quite like the sound that she makes, I must say. With regards to the riding position on the bike, you are of course sitting upright. It's that style of bike, but you're not sitting bolt upright like you would on, say, a Bonneville. You are a little bit leant forward. There's certainly no significant waste on your wrists or anything like that, so I wouldn't worry about that. It's a perfectly comfortable position to be in, and my knees are perhaps a little bit more acute
than on some of those other retro bikes. So I would describe it as, for a retro bike, a sort of a sporty riding position. It's very comfortable though, no doubt about that. Handlebars are quite nice and wide. Seat is lovely and padded. Really comfy seat on here, and nicely stitched as well, as you saw. I have to say, she feels remarkably light through these corners. These are exactly the sorts of roads that these types of bikes are designed for, I think. Just back lanes for blasting on a Sunday. And she feels nice and light around here, although the bike isn't light, it has to be said. And again, we'll go through that detail of the specs in a moment. But yeah, if you were just plonked on this bike and asked, is that a heavy or light bike, you'd say it was a light bike. It's it feels good actually. Let me just try the brakes. There's nothing behind me. Front brake, very nice actually. The front brake, it's only got a single disc on here, but the front brake nice and progressive and lots of power there. You don't need any more than that. Let's try the rear. Yeah, the rear's okay as well. Nothing special, but it does the job. Let's go around here so we can try one of my favourite handling roads in a moment. There's the sound of that motor. I hope you can hear that through the helmet mic okay. It's got a sort of a high-pitched whine, as well as the low rumble from the exhaust. Yeah, she sounds quite purposeful like that. Something I don't like about the bike though, so far, and of course this is a brand new, this is a demo bike, is the gearbox. Just feels a little bit spongy to me. You have to be pretty firm about getting it into gear. I have to say, so far I've not missed any gears or had any forced neutrals, things like that, and it is nice and easy to get into neutral, which isn't always the case on new bikes. I mean, you get used to it, it's not a problem. It's just something compared to other bikes, which I often describe as snickable. This one feels a little bit spongy in the gearbox, but it's not, as I say, it's not enough to put you off or anything like that. It's just something I notice. Clutch on it is relatively heavy compared to other similar bikes as well. But again, not so heavy that it'll put you off the machine. Right, let's have a little whiz down this road. Yeah, it feels nice and balanced through these corners. The handling actually is much better than I anticipated it was going to be. Suspension is perhaps a little bit harsh. You know, it's a bumpy road this, but I'm feeling like I'm being kicked out the seat a little bit. Might need a bit of preload winding off, something like that, but yeah, the suspension I guess isn't the best in the world, but again, this is a basic bike and it's built actually to a bit of a budget. So rather than talk about that budget and the numbers now, let's jump off the bike again. I'll talk you through the spec of the machine.
Alright, I've written the specs down, but no guarantees for my accuracy here. I'm no expert on this sort of stuff. Okay, let's start with the engine then. Here we are. It's the characteristic Moto Guzzi V-twin. This is actually an 850cc unit, the same as they use in the V85 TT. Transversely mounted in that Moto Guzzi way, as you can see, very distinctive looking. Puts out 65 brake horsepower at 6,800 RPM and 73 Newton meters of torque. That's 54 pound-feet if you're old school like me. Coming down the back end here, we've got, as I say, no chain here, no maintenance to worry about. You've got shaft drive, so that's a nice touch as well, and accounts for a bit of the weight. The weight of this bike, 198 kilograms dry, so quite heavy, but thanks to that V-twin engine, it has got a very low centre of gravity, so it never actually feels heavy at all. Coming down the front here to the brakes, it's got just a single disc on here, which I thought might be a problem, but it turns out it's not when you're actually riding it. The front disc on here is 320mm disc, and it's got a 4-pot Brembo caliper on there as well, so quality brakes. At the rear it's got a 260mm disc and a single pot caliper. Rear suspension, it's got these dual springs which have got adjustment for preload on them, and on the front you've just got very basic 40mm forks. They're right way out forks as well, which is quite unusual these days, isn't it? What else to say? Seat height, nice and low, 780mm, so very low seat height, so good for all but the shortest of riders, although I would say the bike feels quite wide, so your legs are splayed out a little bit, so it doesn't feel quite as low as you'd think maybe. Tank capacity on here 21 litres, so this I imagine is going to be a relatively frugal bike, so good range out of that tank I would think. Electronics wise, it does have that digital instrument panel. It does have smartphone connectivity, although I haven't tried that, I haven't had the chance to. It's got LED indicators, ABS of course, and it's got those LED lights as well. Price wise, it comes in, according to the website, 8,200 in grey, or a yellowy grey, or an orangey red, or this black. Or if you want to spend out for the special, which I would probably do, that's 8,600, and that comes with some nicer flashy paint schemes, a bit more chrome, and just looks nice. Various accessories available for the bike, including things like fly screens, semi-rigid bag for the back rear rack, that sort of thing. And yeah, there we go. So that's the specifications of the bike. So it's not going to win any races, but these bikes aren't about that, are they? All right, let's get back on her. Okay, so much for the Spec. Let's continue with a bit more of a ride then. What's she like when you wind her up? All right, gets up to 70 miles an hour very quickly. Even though it's only got that fairly low power output, it doesn't feel like a low power bike. And these sort of machines you don't want to go ripping around on anyway, do you? The sorts of speeds that you do on these types of roads, absolutely ample power, no problem at all. Maybe a constant 62 here, look. Few vibes through the seat perhaps. Again, not enough to be a problem, just enough to remind you that you're on a motorcycle, that's fine. Very comfortable place to be, and great handling are two of the defining features of this bike. Something I'm not so keen on are the mirrors. They look okay, they're in keeping with the style of the bike, but they do vibrate a little, not enough so that I can't see out of them, but they're not quite as solid as I would like, I have to say. And the other thing I'm not keen, that I'm looking at all the time, is this display here. It's an LCD display, and it's perfectly clear in terms of seeing your speed and so on, but it just looks to me a little bit, I don't know, 1990s, perhaps a little bit low tech now compared to modern day. Again, I guess the bike's built to a price, but everything's there that you need except for a fuel gauge, which is something that really annoys me about motorcycles or new motorcycles that come without fuel gauges. I assume it has a low fuel light, but I've yet to find any other way to tell how much fuel is on this motorcycle. I just don't think there's any excuse for that on modern day bikes. This is the second white van of this review already. Not doing so well with this today. So what's my summary then of the Moto Guzzi V7 Stone? What's my sort of abiding memories of this? Well, on the plus side, I love a simple bike. I love the fact that it doesn't have riding modes and all sorts of electricity to confuse you or have to worry about. You just get on and you ride this bike. Its simplicity I love. I love its exclusivity, the fact it's a Moto Guzzi. It makes you feel special when you're on it. It looks different with that V-twin engine. You just don't see many of these around. And that to me is a plus point. It's very comfortable, one of the most comfortable seats I've come across. And pricing wise, it's very well priced. When you look at the bike that you get in terms of the build quality, the fit and finish on this is way above the Enfield Interceptor for not a lot more money. Well, I say that, it is a lot more, it's a couple of grand more than the Interceptor, but we're still talking, you know, sub 10 grand bikes here. This is on a par with the Triumph Bonnevilles of the world, which are above 10 grand. So the build quality on this I love. The stuff I'm not so keen on, well, that instrumentation that I've talked about. That's just personal preference. I don't much like the gearbox, although I think you get used to it. And then just some silly little niggles, things like the side stand is very difficult to get down. It's quite stiff. It might just be a matter of adjustment on this bike. Might get easier over time. Those mirrors, not so keen on those. But other than that, it's minor things really. It is one of those bikes that is absolutely oodles of character, and if you like characterful bikes and you like to be a little bit different, then this is definitely the bike for you. Because handling wise, she really is lovely.
and the way the engine goes is great. Hello. And as I say, even though despite that relatively high weight figure, she just feels light. I think it'd be a very easy bike to live with. I don't think you'd have any trouble with this, and you'd always have a grin on your face because of that specialness factor. So it's left me in a little bit of a tiz as to whether this is a tick or a cross, this bike for me. I think on balance, I'm going to give it a tick. They do this, as I mentioned, in a V7 Speciale version, which comes in a lovely dark blue with some chrome bits and pieces and some just nice different styling. It's a little bit more expensive, but not a lot, a few £100. Unfortunately, that's not the bike I got to ride. It just wasn't available, but they look really special, and I think that added to the other things about the bike that I like. I mean, it would be a great bike to have in the garage. I want to get out in front of those, unfortunately. Would I have it rather than a Triumph Bonneville if money was no object? Probably not, but then I am a Triumph fanboy. I think overall the Triumphs are just put together, the whole package, not necessarily just the fit and finish, although that is good on the Triumph, but the whole package of the Triumph just works better as a whole. There's too many little niggles about this one that I think the Triumph has it beaten on. Is it better than a Royal Enfield? Yes, it is. The build quality's way better than a Royal Enfield, and it's got more go as well. So at the end of the day, like all these things, I guess you just have to decide which one you like the look of and make your choice. You're not going to be disappointed with any of these modern bikes. There is nothing major wrong with this bike. It just doesn't massively float my boat as much as some other retros do. Let's leave it at that. Anyway, all very much personal taste. I'm no expert, don't take my word for it. If you're interested in one of these, go and get yourself a ride and see what you think, and I'll be interested to know in your comments below if you think I'm talking absolute rubbish or if you agree with me. What I must just say is a huge thanks to Will's Motorcycles up in Peterborough for lending me their demo bike. If you want to have a go on this very bike, give them a call and they can set you up with a test ride on this bike, see what you think and see if you agree or disagree with me. So that's pretty much it for this latest ride review video. I hope you enjoyed that, and if it is your first time to the channel, thanks for watching. Do consider hitting that subscribe button. It'd be great to see you again on the next video. Okay, that's it for this time. Look forward to speaking to you again soon. Until then, this has been the Mr. Flyer. Cheerio.